Live everywhere.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, how you doing, everybody? Good morning. My goodness. Where does that sneak up from? I check that every day. Just like checking my equipment, I check my voice before I come on the air. Everything seems to be fine. Of course, I wouldn't be able to delay things until it was fine, even if I wanted to. But I guess we're on the air. That is a pleasant surprise. And I thought we were going to be off. We just sent out the emergency word to everyone that we would be unexpectedly off the air this morning due to technical problems out there in Netroots Radio land. And, well, I guess we are on, but that's okay. My invitation to Armando stands. I don't know if he is available today, but I have seen, there's some things going on in Florida. And on today, November 9th, 2018, there we go. I knew I would get that in there somewhere. Well, it'll be a good day on any given Friday, really, to recap things. Normally, we stray a little bit off the beaten path of the day's political stories and try and pull in something a little unusual and esoteric, but always with a political twist, of course. But so much happening in Florida today, I would find it difficult to believe if anyone told me that Armando wasn't raring and ready to go. And yet, now it turns out, well, I don't know. He's been absent from Twitter for a whole 25 minutes. Who even knows what's going on? Whether or not he's available to come on the show, of course, we don't know, and we'll see how things go. We'll stay flexible about that. I am, let me see. I'll ask you this, Justice, if we're on the air, prove it, man. If we're on the air, how about, setting us up with a easy retweetable tweet to let people know that is the case. Anybody who may have tuned out because we sent out the other tweet saying, sorry, it looks like we'll be off the air and you'll have to wait for the podcast, can come on back. Okay. Well, it looks like I'm going to have to put the pants on anyway, after all, after planning to do the whole show in pajamas because we weren't going to be on the air. That's a weird feeling. I have to tape the podcast anyway, and I might as well do it from 9 to 11 and get the job done and keep myself on track. And who knows? The problems could be fixed at any moment. We might be able to join the program in progress, as they say in the business, when you F things up and then get things set back on track again. But we may have been able to do that from the very beginning. So if so, good morning. Glad to have you there hearing me and unable to communicate with me, except via Twitter. We use that KITM hashtag, of course. And I guess all the other various methods through which you might attempt to communicate with me, and I find out about it after the show is over, like, say, email or posting on the Daily Kos Radio is live post on Daily Kos each morning. I apologize to those of you for whom that ends up being the slowest method of communication, but I can only keep so many screens open at once till we get a full-time producer in here and, I don't know, build a studio and do all sorts of other things. And, anyway, all right. Well, maybe I'll have, there we go. Thank you, Justice. Here comes we're back on the air tweet, and now we can send that around and everyone can rejoice. And, there will be much rejoicing. And then you play that yay sound effect and, we move on. All right. How will we, spend our morning? Let's go over to Pocket and open up the Twitter feed, and I can tell you all about the things that have been grabbing my attention over the last 24 hours or so, and then go way, way back in time to like 25 hours to the stories that I didn't get to put on the air yesterday. Tops on the list today, of course, recounts underway in Florida. Or not recounts. And that's an important point. I'm sorry I made that mistake. We're used to saying that about Florida. The regular count is still going in Florida and in Georgia and in California and elsewhere. Republicans, this is a key point. Everybody has to listen up on this one. Don't make the same mistake I did. Armando tells me he can come on around 9:30, so we'll return to the details of Florida later on. But here's what you need to know. And you know I hate those headlines. What you need to know about the counting of votes that's going on now is that Republicans are counting on you to make this very same mistake. They're counting on you having internalized the framing of A, counting that's going on after the news programs go off the telly on Tuesday night, as a recount and not the initial counting of votes. And they are counting on you internalizing the frame that recounts are subject to shenanigans. Very often they're shenanigans, but shenanigans nonetheless, and that there's something somehow suspect about them. And of course, that one's a little closer to true because we're used to, or at least it rings closer to true. I guess I should say it's truthier, right? That's the Stephen Colbert word for it. Because we know that recounting is particularly fraught with procedural, not difficulties per se, but procedural combat. You fight about how to count, what to count, when to count, where to count, who gets to watch you count. All of those sorts of legal maneuverings lend a something less than legitimate feel sometimes to recounts, and particularly if you keep losing your recounts. That's a problem too. But I think they're counting on us being confused into thinking that any counting that doesn't happen on Tuesday is a recount, and it's wrong. What's actually happening here is they're still counting the votes that were cast on Election Day on time in accordance with the rules. It's just that it takes a while to do that. Millions of votes are cast, and they're cast on different systems, and some are on paper, and some are electronic, and some are both, and some are absentee, and some are in person, and some are provisional, and some are not. And it takes a long time to account for all these things, and that's just the way it is. I mean, I know I must have, I retweeted this one. Hunter had, I think, a good summary of this problem, though it wasn't necessarily aimed at this semantical problem. I did see somebody else make mention of it, and I really should have put that aside because it's an excellent point. But here's the way Hunter put it yesterday. As we see races from Florida to California flip as the slow counting process goes on, I added the word process there, it might be a good opportunity for media to reflect on how they could better relate to viewers that the counting does not end, that is to say that we are still counting, not recounting. The counting does not end when their own election eve anchors go off the air. Extremely important point. A little flippantly put, but true. And it deserves to be put that way because it deserves to, you should be deriding the view that somehow the reality of our election system and governance, which follows from the electoral system supposedly, is actually determined, actually dictated by what you see on television. It is not. A television coverage accompanies the actual process, but that's all. And we've given so much over to the television coverage that, one, we do things like demand concession speeches from candidates. When it becomes clear, and it used to require a lot more clarity than this. When it becomes clear that you're mathematically eliminated, let's say, from contention, then fine, I guess civility, whatever that is, demands that we make this speech. You call the other person and congratulate them, and we all get together over drinks at the end of the night, like it used to be under Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan, or whatever. That's our last remaining vestige of that, is that we very civilly call one another and say, congratulations on a race well run, even though we very often hate the other person because it's very rarely a race well run. So, anyway, man, I'm telling you, there's so much happening here. So, what they're counting on then is our recollection that, at least for some of us still, prior to the year 2000, to the 2000 election, the original, mother of all recount situations, we were able to, we weren't, I guess, so evenly divided in so many places and so and I mean, I guess we would think that this is an improvement, that we are at least closer to, a flux. I mean, if it was two equally responsible parties, it would be a much better situation that each election would be competitive. But no. Anyway, what they're, I have so much to say about this. What they're depending on is our collective recollection, I guess, of the days gone by when it was obvious by the end of the broadcast evening what was going to be the outcome. Although how that was ever the case, I don't know. And it was fraught with problems from the beginning. We had to ban the reporting of exit polling results during the day while polls were still open someplace, and all of this stuff in order to stop discouraging later time zones from voting. So we know the effect that television coverage can have on the elections. And now we've gotten into the habit of course, we're so virtuous. We wait to discuss exit polls now, but instead, we want to wrap up by 11 o'clock. We want our anchors and talking heads and the consultants we've paid to come in and tell us what this means, in all capital letters, I guess, or all capitalized, to wrap it up by 11 o'clock so we can start our national broadcast or whatever, or do the local news, which we sometimes do. I guess that's what comes on at 11. Even though, if it's a news program, hell, just suspend it and go with the national coverage. They want things wrapped up at a certain point. And so hence you get things like James Carville. I did not watch the coverage on Tuesday night, but again, through Twitter, I watched people watching the coverage. And it was, as I recall, James Carville, of all people, sitting on, I don't know whose air, CNN perhaps, declaring it not a wave based on partial results from part of the East Coast. And then, it turned out to actually be a wave. This was like the snap polling thing in reverse, where the pundits would tell us who won the debate based on optics. And then America was asked, and America was able to answer immediately, no, this whole thing is stupid. You have it exactly backwards. And so they said, to hell with the snap polling. We won't be doing that anymore. Here we have pundits getting on the air and snap analyzing the partial results of part of the country, not realizing that there's the rest of the country. And the wave is something that you would have to look at the overall picture in order to determine. So not only did they get the wave thing wrong, but they're in the habit of trying to call these races early. So, we're conditioned to take the word of the television folks as what happened, and that's a bad thing all by itself. Now, on to the next part of it. Hunter's second tweet and all this. We also know that the slow counts, and again, it's the count, not the recount. That's a whole different level of this problem. We also know that the TV folks know that we're conditioned to think of anything that comes after their calling of the race as a recount. Wait, late word in, they're recounting the ballots. Now they're still counting them. How could it take so long? Things are electronic. It's the computer age, et cetera, et cetera. Well, Hunter posits it this way. We also know that the slow counts typically result in Democrats making more late gains than Republicans. Why? It is because large population centers tend to be the slow ones. It's not surprising. We just aren't used to this new normal of having so very many close races. And that could possibly be adding to the confusion part of it. But it stands to reason, of course, that the large population centers might be the slow ones. I guess people might be thinking, well, those are the computerized ones. And sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. But a large population center will be the slow ones because that is where there are the most votes. We have the most work to do here, where we have 10,000 votes to count in this precinct versus these rural farmhouse precincts where they have 500 people and half of them don't show up. So, there is that. Hunter finally concludes, instead, top Republicans, including our idiot president, are promoting the idea that votes counted by election officials after midnight of Election Day are somehow invalid because reasons. This is a toxic, cancerous, stupid notion, and people promoting it should be shunned. that isn't going to happen, but it is true and ought to happen. And it will take us some time to get around to that. But yes, they're counting on, I think at the moment, the Republicans are counting on the idea that if you are A, counting votes, and B, changing the projected results that have been announced on on the television, the official television, then some shenanigans must be going on here. Because how could television be wrong? Essentially, is what they're asking. And in the golden age of television, I guess, we all got brought up in this way that, well, one, the reporters were relatively trustworthy people. Or maybe I should say, I can't really pass judgment on whether they were trustworthy people. They were trusted, back in the Walter Cronkite era or whatever. And before we had a national television network, the latecomer, Fox News, that had gotten into the business explicitly to be a partisan voice, I guess it was easier to believe the telly. But the whole invention of Fox News was a play on that notion. They realized very early on that if you dressed people up in suits and sat them at a desk and gave them papers to shuffle and put up little graphics behind their heads of, whatever was going on in the story and had a little illustration there, and you had stand-up reporters elsewhere, and they looked like regular reporters, you could play on the conditioning of Americans and probably people around the world to believe what they saw on television news. That, of course, built on decades of actually working hard to make sure that you were reporting the truth and the verifiable truth for the most part. I mean, TV news screwed up all the time, I'm sure, even back in the golden age. But we got used to the idea that television news people were not making it up or not spinning it with any particular vigor, let's say. And they played on that and said, as long as we wear the same uniform, we might be able to change the narrative entirely and just say the opposite thing. However, it might come out, to the benefit of the Republican Party and conservatives. And then something. I guess we'll be able to take over the world. I suppose that might be the idea. And, this is, I think, best illustrated by the 2000 election. Most of you, I don't know, how's the audience here? Were most of you adults and fully cognizant of what was going on in 2000? I guess some of you might not be. Increasingly, more and more of you might not be. But if you were there and you experienced it, or even experienced it as a chapter in your history book, you probably get the same sense that this was highly suspect, especially the night of. And this was where I guess Fox really came into its inheritance of the work they'd been doing to disguise themselves as one of the trustworthy news outlets, news networks. And they finally got to pull the trigger on the secret mission here, where they were counting votes, and a projection had been made. And, that lays down the law. Al Gore had won Florida and would therefore likely win the presidency. And then, hold on a minute, folks. One weird network, that new one that has the Simpsons and stuff, and you've always suspected there was something just wee bit wrong with those people, but they convinced you after 10 years on the air that all right, I can see they're more conservative, but they do have suits, and they certainly appear to be able to get Democrats to come on their show, so they must be legitimate. They say no, it's the opposite. George Bush has won Florida because other thing. They had something to point at. They put people on the ground and in suits said, election officials say it actually came out the other way. And it hadn't really come out the other way at that point either, but they said it did. And then people are confused. Well, I don't understand. I thought Al Gore won. No, he didn't. The news says so. And after that, of course, there was still the official mechanism. The official mechanism wasn't giving up and allowing the television to control what was really happening in the world, although, we had done that in prior years. I guess a missing piece of this puzzle is, the intervening decades between, like the 50s when they, I guess, first started doing televised election results, perhaps. I don't even know. I don't know what the history of the television is at that point. I'm guessing that prior to that, they just didn't have the same kind of network coverage of it. And then all the way through the 80s and 90s, we had the development of this election consortium that took on this kind of quasi-official, quasi-governmental almost role in calling the elections. And it was also, by the way, during this period that we solidified the idea, I think, this is when we solidified the idea that if a candidate concedes that actually means something official. And I don't know whether it really ever did. That part I'm not 100% sure of. But it had come to take on the meaning of, well, I concede, and so that's a signal to those of you counting the votes that you can stop now. We no longer care. I give up. And it really shouldn't even be up to the candidate at that point to call that off. People should have their votes counted. It's, if you get the permission of all these people in line behind me, then you can cut in line and cut off the voting count. But no, the idea that concession would stop things. I mean, for the people whose job it was to hustle around and get the answer as quickly as possible, I suppose the natural inclination there was to say, phew, I don't have to do that anymore. That guy gave up. But between that and the formation of this consortium of the networks, that sort of, I don't know, I don't even remember how that thing was organized and whether it still exists or whatever, but there was sort of like a centralized clearinghouse of information that worked with elections officials and the networks cooperating amongst themselves and sort of setting themselves up as like, well, we've never gotten this stuff wrong before, so why not trust us now to tell you who won the election? 2000, I think, was probably the end of that particular phase of that experiment, and I think things have changed since then. But just like, I guess the best analog to it would be, I mean, it's a weird thing to have to describe, and I really should be doing more study of it before I describe it to you, in such authoritative terms. I may be wrong about this, but this is my recollection. It's a little bit like when the what was it? The League of Women Voters used to be like generally recognized as in charge of setting up presidential debates. And the then three networks, and I guess later on for a while Fox, all sort of agreed that they'll cover the things, but the League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan organization, because some women vote for Republicans and some women vote for Democrats, and so therefore nonpartisan. Instead, it's actually bipartisan. But another thing we've kind of become conditioned to believe, it's nonpartisan if you have some of both. No, it's bipartisan. And we do sometimes say that, but we use it interchangeably in this country. That's how baked in the two-party system is. Bipartisan, nonpartisan, you know what I mean. No, I don't. What do you mean? Be clear about these things. What? Where was I? Oh, yes. Right. So we had come to this point where we had these weird quasi-official consortia, either the League of Women Voters arranging for debate. We'll tell you when the debates are and what the rules are and where they'll have those debates and what format those debates will be in. And we're now in a presidential election. It's free for all. And we fight over everything, where the debate's going to be and how long and what's the format, and can one candidate hump chairs while the other one talks or whatever. I didn't even realize that was a new thing until we had this election, in 2016, I mean. But, it was just a given that the League of Women Voters would set this thing. And now we see partisan wrangling and all of the networks deciding whether or not this is going to be a real debate and who's going to cover this one. And things have gotten worse, but I don't know. Maybe it's even better that we fight out in the open about these things rather than just, I don't know, some official somewhere in a suit told me that this was when the debate was going to be. And that's that. And so afterwards, we built this system where the networks just agreed that we'll be in charge of telling people who won. I mean, we're not going to make up, so long as we all pinky swear not to make up the answer, then it should be fine, right? It's based on data. And besides, if we're wrong, this consortium is made out of news organizations that are actually, that actually care about making things right, about reporting the correct things. And we're all working together. If there's a change in the outcome of the election, obviously, it's unspoken. It goes without saying that we'll all change our reporting, right? Well, what if one of the members of the consortium doesn't buy into that whole thing about being fair and balanced, even though that's their motto, right? Their tagline. I guess the original projection from Republicans. Well, if we say we're fair and balanced, then no one can accuse us of not being fair and balanced, because we're not. Because look, it says we're fair and balanced. What's wrong with you? How could you dispute our advertising tagline? So we really painted ourselves into a corner, and Fox really exploited that for all it was worth. And now we're in a situation where even after 2000, a lot of us just believe that if they say on television that it wasn't a wave, then it wasn't a wave. And if they say on television that Democrats lost, and then they end up counting all the votes, and then it turns out that Democrats won, then that's some sort of shenanigans and a flipping of the race that is somehow unacceptable or nefariously executed because it happened after the guy on television said the race came out the other way. And further, now we have the part where, where they're really scoring their points in this particular election is now that they just say that after the television guy says somebody won, then all other counting, even if these are ballots that have never been counted in the first place, and it's part of the 1% still left to report according to the graphic on television, that's somehow invalid. Very weird, very dangerous, and we could really use a revamping of how we look at everything. Maybe this will prompt it. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I almost decided not to come back. Too much happening on Twitter. Shall we catch up with some of those things? Here's some questions. Anyway, let's see. Too bad. I should have got a screenshot of that one. Hold on, let me see if I can still rescue this thing by scrolling back. There was this great exchange just a minute ago. Let's see. Are we going to lose this one? Yeah, see, I should have grabbed this one before it changed. Oh, no, here we go. Oh, there it is. Let me grab it. Hold on a minute, everybody. Technical difficulties. Let's see. No, I can't do it that way. I would have to do it. I got to screenshot this thing in, what do you call it? In TweetDeck. Hold on. Bear with me, everybody. And let's see. Armando is almost ready. Hang on a second, Armando. I have to fix this thing. Here's what happened. Dang. Let me explain in real time what's going on. Jesse Singal tweeted. How do we even explain this one? I think I saw it the other day. Was it Benjamin Applebaum? Is that his name? Right? Tweeting yesterday, complaining about the use of gaslighting. The term gaslighting, and saying, I wish people would stop using this. And hold on a second. I'm sending out a screen cap of my deleted tweet here, or not my deleted tweet, but let's see what just happened. Is this one? Yeah, okay. So Benjamin Applebaum tweeted around that his complaint that people were using this new stupid word, gaslighting, and it's not a real word, and I don't even know what it means, and it's so dumb, and people shouldn't use it. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? Atrios was laughing at him, and I was laughing at Atrios, laughing at him, saying, I like this new Benjamin Rooney guy. Do you ever notice that people are using weird words that you don't understand, et cetera, right? So that was a weird exchange yesterday. Jesse Singal tweeting this morning, gaslighting, he says, you'll see what he's doing here quickly. Gaslighting was first coined on Twitter last year. There's an insane rumor going around that its origin is a much older film, but that film doesn't exist. So anyone who believes that origin story has something wrong with them in their head, which is, of course, Hadoy. I was amazed by Applebaum's thing, but not everybody has heard of gaslighting, Gaslight the film. I guess. It's a relatively old film. It's from the 40s. I think it was made twice even. But there's one famous version of it, but both are from the 40s. And you could be forgiven for not knowing, I guess. But the last year or so, or last 2 years, since they've been using the term so much more, and it was in widespread use before Trump. It's just Trump is now like the Lord of all, gaslighting. He's taken it to the next level. But of course, it was in widespread use, particularly among a certain segment of online feminists who used it all the time to describe the way certain men would attempt to hide their bias and misogyny. But it's come into widespread use in the Trump era for very obvious reasons. So anyway, so Applebaum apparently missed that whole thing and was like, no one brings it to his attention, I guess, until it's too late. That, no, it's not a new or a neologism, as we have come up with the term for new words being invented. It's not a new thing. And there was a whole feature-length film that's actually extraordinarily popular that would have explained the whole thing to you. And somebody spent an hour and a half to 2 hours actually setting up, a cinematic explanation for what is gaslighting. But no, I'm not going to bother with that. I don't have any cultural awareness. So anyway, through that whole exchange, and Jesse Singal's making fun of that this morning by saying gaslighting was first coined on Twitter last year, and there's this insane rumor going around that its origin is a much older film, but that film doesn't exist. So anyone who believes that origin story has something wrong with them in their head. And if you don't know about Gaslight, the film, the plot of it is basically that the guy who's trying to keep his deep, dark secrets from being discovered does so by intentionally convincing this woman that all the evidence that she is discovering of this deep, dark secret is in fact the product of her own mental illness and not reality. And of course, that describes very well what's going on in reverse in the Trump era. And the big joke is, of course, he's obviously making a play on that, but I guess it's not obvious enough because Brian Cuban, who is Brian Cuban? I don't know. He's an attorney and a best-selling author. What a great author he is. He's the best at selling, apparently. He says he's the best-selling author. I don't know who he is. You don't know who he is. You might know now. And so he responds to Jesse by saying, no, gaslighting was first coined on Twitter. Dumbest tweet of the day so far, he says. And now I wasn't sure whether he was possibly being tongue-in-cheek about this too. So I tweeted that one out and laughed. But now I'm reliably informed that the second tweet at which I said, ha, 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 had been deleted. And so now I had to go back there and redo it again. So there we have it. And, well, I don't know. I guess I was worried, was I not catching on to Brian Cuban's joke, but then he deleted the tweet, and I think that pretty much answers the question. No, he didn't understand what he was talking about. So there we have it. I think that's the recap of things. That's not the biggest story of the day, as you know. But it did occupied my attention. Now, though, Armando has been patiently waiting, and we left off before the break talking about the situation in Florida and in Georgia in general, and the dangers of what's going on here. That the Republican playbook of 2000 has been modified in a very dangerous way, and they've bumped things up in the order, where in 2000 they were at least able to latch on to the idea that recounts, as fraught as they were with procedural battling and hair splitting, legal hair splitting, were legitimately viewed with some suspicion, at the very least. They've now moved it to the point where the actual first counting of the ballots, if it happens after the television newsmen go off the air on Tuesday night, that it too is somehow suspect, because official word has come from my television that someone won the race. And now, having counted all the ballots, I find that the answer is different, which is really no different than saying, well, with 1% of precincts reporting Jones is in the lead, we declare Jones the winner. And then saying, wait a second, we counted a second precinct and Smith won that one, and I guess it was Smith, and maybe we should have waited.
Nobody called the Florida Senate race, David.
Yeah, well, there was that. The networks have gotten better in their practices. They stopped using the exit polling and reporting those early in the day, and they stopped making calls when things were close, because they realized the power of their calling things, which it should never have been the case, that they had the power to determine who won by saying, well, we project this to be the case. And I don't think they ever even intended that to be what happened. They just realized, oh my God, look at the power of television. We said that in all probability Smith won and really Jones won, and everybody's all upset because, television, it's powerful. We shouldn't have said anything. So they've pulled back on that. Even that's not enough. And Republicans now, say nobody called anything, but they wanted to and should have called the opposite, because then I would have won, you see. And, we see things like that. We see, and so they know the power on the other side of getting that first proclamation, the first, news breaking that X person won, even if X person didn't win. And so if they can't lure the networks into doing the work for them, they will attempt to recreate the system as best they can by simply calling a press conference, knowing that they're a candidate in an important election, announcing that they've won, declaring victory, and then, for some of these guys, particularly in Florida and Georgia, using the governmental power and the levers that they control as elected officials, who really should have stepped down prior to the next campaign, but didn't, to try and interfere with and declare closed all of the counting, so that the only information out there is their declaration that they've won.
Yeah, honestly, I can't speak to Georgia, but in Florida, that's all irrelevant. Rick Scott's press conference last night is irrelevant.
Oh, yes, it always
President
was and always should have
Trump's
been.
tweet is irrelevant. I think people need to keep the eye on the ball. Under Florida law, the votes will be counted. There will be a hand recount if Nelson's margin is less than 0.25%.
Yes, that's the way it should be.
They don't get under any law to throw out ballots. That's not permitted anywhere. You can look and see what actual Rick Scott's lawsuit says, and what's it about. It's a public records lawsuit.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, okay. What do you want to see? I mean, you have election officials in here while we count the ballots. Don't think that Broward County is in some room in the back and there's no Republican in there. There are all in there.
Yeah. Now, they don't have to say that they're in there, and Republicans can get on Twitter and say all they want. We've been excluded. We've been shut out. I mean, that was very much what they did in 2000, and have a riot over it.
As long as we just don't get caught up in their stupid minutia, there's no legal mechanism for stopping the counting of the votes, and there's no legal mechanism for not doing a manual recount.
Yes, if only legal stuff mattered.
Well, it does
I
matter.
I hope it does this time. I mean, what
Broward
worried
County's
me
not
was
gonna stop
seeing.
counting its votes. They have from 12 days after the election by law to send their certified results.
Yes.
12 days from Tuesday, not today, not tomorrow.
It's clear
12 days.
what they're allowed to do. And then I guess what was most worrying to me is, for instance, seeing on the Twitter machine that, well, in Florida, Rick Scott says he's going to send the state police to disrupt the counting somehow. Of course, the way he would put it is, well, we're going to put a stop to all these, horrible shenanigans from weirdo partisans. We all know the television said I won. And
what he said, and I don't know why he said it, was he was going to ask the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to investigate the counting of ballots. Mm-hmm. Investigate what?
There's nothing to investigate. However, you can dispatch people to roust the people who are trying to execute the mandate they have to make this count happen within 12 days. Ticket their cars, tow them away, block the doors, padlock the offices. Oh, that's all illegal. You can't do that.
Okay, listen. It's possible that this descends into fascism and everybody gets arrested.
That would be great.
It's possible, I guess. But then let me tell you, the counting of the ballots is the least of our worries. That means they're just that randomly can throw us all in jail.
Yes. Well, I mean, once that's out the window.
At which point, we might as well just go get our guns, and it's a civil war. And I'm not kidding. If what you're purporting is going to happen, the counting of these ballots is the least of our concerns. We're getting thrown in jail for being a political opponent.
Yes. Well, we might. I hope not.
Because look, they, Marco Rubio can make a fool of himself, and Rick Scott can have a stupid press conference. To what end? I think maybe it's to raise money for the recount effort or something.
Could be.
Because legally, there's nothing to do. Legally, the Broward County Board of Election Supervisors is doing its job, and their job is to submit certified results 12 days from the election day. That's their job. Yes. They're reporting of it in real time and AP counts. That literally has no legal bearing on who will become the United States Senator under Florida election law. All right?
Okay.
So 12 days from now, from that. Now, ironically, they have to finish counts and recounts on the 18th. There is actually a real problem with Florida right now. And that's why you're not going to wait till the 12th day to do your certification, by the way.
Oh.
Because we are within the manual recount number for Nelson, and we're within the automatic machine recount number for Gillum.
Mm-hmm.
How long does it take to do that?
I don't know.
Well, you're supposed to be done, within 12 days of election with your recounts, even though you don't have to submit your certified results until the 12th day. But that's the way they wrote the statute. It's a big problem if Broward County takes till the 12th day. But they won't. They will probably finish this weekend and report on Monday. Most everyone else will report on Monday, and then you'll do your count, and they'll say, well, look here. Florida law says we've got to do a manual recount. Let's get to it.
Yes.
By the way, there's not just the United States Senate race. There are a number of races. Let me ask you this. Is the Republican candidate for agricultural commissioner in Florida, who is behind, arguing that they should stop counting the votes? Is he going to say no recount?
It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
no, but P.S. That's the good kind. I don't know. I guess you approach it as a gimmitarian. Well, we should be recounting that one, but this other idea that there should be a recount in the Senate race, that's just shenanigans.
Right. That's my point. But the point is they're always going to say that. I don't care what they say anymore. I care what power they exert to thwart democracy. I'm beyond caring about what stupid Donald Trump says and what stupid Rick Scott says and what stupid Marco Rubio says and what stupid Never Trumpers say. They're all lying.
That is probably a
pieces
healthy
of
approach.
crap. We have to focus on what our rights are. So what happened in Bush v. Gore? Remember, you set the stage comparing this to that.
Yeah.
Well, they did all that, and they did their Brooks Brothers riot, and they did all sorts of things. But at the end of the day, how did they steal the election in 2000? And they stole it. How did they do it?
In the court.
In the Supreme Court of the United States.
Yeah.
They ordered stopping the vote, stopping the count. That's where they did it. If they don't do that, they keep counting the votes. Al Gore's president. They're all pissed, but Al Gore's president.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court of the United States has no conceivable jurisdiction here. They don't have Kavanaugh. Yeah. They don't have Rehnquist. Now it goes to the only court that can stop this now is the Supreme Court of Florida. And luckily, not till the day after the new governor is sworn in, the current makeup of the Supreme Court of Florida will not stop the count. It will not. We just got to go down there, get everyone's traditional ballots signed. I guess, well, that deadline's passed.
Yeah. And
let's count the votes. Maybe we win, maybe we lose. Just focus on that. It's up. And by the way, you liberals are saying, oh, look at that. Florida's still a mess. Florida's not a mess. Florida is calmly counting the votes, which they're doing in other states, by the way. Arizona, they're counting the votes. California, they're counting the votes. Maine, they're counting the votes. They're counting the votes everywhere. There is not an election in the United States that is certified yet. Not one. Not the unopposed, not the landslide. The systems work the way they work legally. You certify your count in X number of days after the election. And then you're certified the winner. And that's when you're officially the winner of the election and can go get sworn in to be in January to be the new representative or the new senator or the new whatever. Now, you started with, well, they like to have it declared that Rick Scott was not declared the winner. It was never declared.
That's true here.
Rick Scott tried to declare himself the winner, but no one paid attention because everyone knew there was a slim margin and they were still counting votes. This is trumped up nonsense, but it's not Trump type trumped up nonsense. This is typical Republican trumped up nonsense. They are counting the votes. That's what they're doing.
Well, that's nice. And I hope they get to continue to do that.
Well, again, there's not a court that can order it. Rick Scott filing a lawsuit doesn't stop vote counting.
No. I know that will happen. But hopefully, and then they'll seek, well, I want an immediate injunction. Well, you won't get that. But it'll be
He filed a lawsuit in Florida State Court. And as I said to everybody here, these are purely Florida issues. And how did the United States Supreme Court in the Bush v. Gore case force its way into the case? Because they forced their way into the case. You might not recall, but they cited an obscure Supreme Court case called Blacker. I don't know if you remember that.
No, I don't remember that chapter of it.
Talking about it. And Blacker was a case that was decided in the era of right after the Restoration. And there were fights about 1876, as you may recall. There was a huge controversy about it. And because they said they changed the rules of the election.
Okay.
Right?
I'll take it.
And they cited the Blacker case, and they said, well, you can't change the rules of the election because, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. And they made up stuff, but there was some lines in it.
Okay.
In the Constitution that provided a basis for that. And there was a Supreme Court precedent called Blacker. Now, they ended up ignoring all that and making up a cockamamie one-time only equal protection argument, as you know.
Yes.
And one of
That
the
part I remember.
most disgraceful, of Supreme Court. And I say it with all honesty because it was nakedly nonsense, and they stopped the vote.
Yeah.
You know, you can. There really was no way that you could argue that there was an equal protection argument that was solved, an equal protection violation that was remedied by that. But look, the Blacker case was based on Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, and the key language was each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress.
Okay.
As you know, there is no electoral college in choosing the senator from the state of Florida.
True there. Yes.
There is no federal question here. Rick Scott couldn't dream up of one because he would have run to federal court immediately and tried to see how he can stop the vote. That's what George Bush did after the Supreme Court of Florida said statewide recount. And he took a cert petition to the Supreme Court of the United States, which had nothing to say to this, and voted based on this Blacker decision that they had questioned. And then, of course, Senator Day O'Connor, to her shame, I know everyone's trying to rehabilitate her, but she, in her moment of truth, voted to stop counting votes and to steal a presidential election, and that's the first line of her tombstone for me. I don't know about anybody else, but that's the first line of her tombstone for me.
Yeah. Okay.
That when it happened, that you had a chance to just, frankly, stay out of it. You decided, no, I'm going to steal the election instead. There's no way to do that for the Republicans here unless the Supreme Court of Florida is willing to do it. The people who know who sits on the Supreme Court of Florida know that's not going to happen with this Supreme Court of Florida. There aren't 5 votes for that. Or there aren't 4 votes for that because there's 7. There are not. There would be the day after Ron DeSantis would be sworn in because he gets to replace 3. And then, of course, there would be. But there isn't right now. Count the votes. Don't look at this other stuff. And don't play the game of, oh, what a mess, Florida. Florida actually is counting its votes, which it's supposed to do.
Yes. Well, I didn't get as far as saying it's Florida's fault here. This is, I think, squarely laid elsewhere, the blame for this one.
Well, no, I mean, I've seen too many Democrats saying that, though.
Saying
this is
Florida's mess
fault.
up.
Oh,
well,
look at this mess. They're counting votes. That's stupid.
Yes. Well, they just they're confused from denouncing Farrakhan. And so they haven't got their bearings back. They're exhausted from having to denounce Farrakhan and maybe therefore blaming Florida improperly for this. I only blame Republicans in Florida who are doing this and hand waving and attempting to wave us away from what we ought to be doing, which thankfully you're able to point out they actually are doing. But I worry about things like, of course, well, the Brooks Brothers riot and the way they were able to disrupt things and simply say, look, it's the truth that the law requires the counting go on, but it doesn't, and the law would also require that we get out of the way of these doors and allow people to get in and go to work or leave at the end of the day of work. But we're not going to move, and you can come arrest us if you think you control the levers of the power behind the state police. You can give that a shot. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but come on and let's see. And I guess have yet to see that develop. It worries me, given that we've just spent the last couple minutes discussing there was no basis for this whatsoever. It was naked partisanship, but they got a Supreme Court to do it at one point.
I agree. So I guess you could imagine there's a somebody's working feverishly now to try to create some kind of federal question.
I'm sure someone's trying to. Whether they succeed in doing it, I don't know. Yeah, well,
there just isn't one.
I know.
I know what you're saying,
right.
and they give them a little time to make them up with one. But if they had one, they'd be in federal court right now.
Yes, well, they're probably just outside working with a laptop. I mean, I'm sure you had the same. I don't know whether you had learned the same thing. I learned my law in a very weird place, as you know, George Mason University School of Law, and it was our con law professor said, you're not worth your salt as a lawyer if you can't find a federal question whatever you're doing.
That's all dependent on whether the judge wants to take the case.
Yes.
Because I've brought federal
one.
questions, and there have been obvious federal questions, and the federal courts have tried to limit jurisdiction, and they've ended up, saying, that's not really a federal question.
Well, he wasn't telling us whether the judges were right. He was just telling us whether you're not doing your job if you haven't found a federal question.
Think of something. Okay, well, this is what? Okay, the obvious is here's the easy argument if you want one. It's the one they used in Bush v. Gore. Equal protection. You're violating the equal protection of all other Florida voters who turn their ballots in on time, or all other count. But that's not true because the ballots came in. I said, oh, wait a second. So your argument is we're counting ballots that were late? No, we're not. I tell you, again, if you wanted to dream up an equal protection argument, you could say the ballot designs discrepancy in state by state is causing an equal protection clause. And by the way, in that sense, we do have Brenda Snipes playing a Teresa Laporte role.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I hear the music.
Yeah, I mean, okay. We have to deal with the break, but this will give us a minute to regroup. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's premature, of course, to declare that the Florida Republicans have gone berserk and declared martial law here. I'm just saying,
no, but
watch out for it. Yeah.
They've gone berserk, and I'll tell you how. And Marco Rubio will be someone I'll talk to you about.
Okay. Yes, all right. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just, I guess here's a programming note for you in the LOL YOLO Nothing Matters category. Donald Trump, I guess, woke up and put on a suit and went outside and decided to talk to the president. I don't know if he's on his way somewhere. Is he going to the golf course? I don't know where he's headed to. But he has already pulled out the I don't hardly know the guy play on Matthew Whitaker. The purported acting attorney general. I shouldn't even say purported. He's just not. He's just a guy. He's the chief of staff of the now fired attorney general. And it doesn't work that way, that the chief of staff is the next ranking person to move into the job. The deputies move into the job. But he now says, people are saying, did you vet him? I mean, he's a shady character and a partisan extremist. And how did you end up doing this? And he says, I don't know Whitaker. He says that's the quote, according to the reporters who were on the scene.
I heard that he was terrific, but I don't really know.
Right. He's highly thought of. I heard he's highly thought of. He isn't, but okay, you could have heard that.
He was the advisor to a company that was fined $26 million for bilking people.
Yeah, he's highly thought of by the federal government. You mean the Federal Trade Commission? Yeah. Well, no, but he's not highly thought of. He's very poorly thought of, but it doesn't matter. But I mean, how did he think that was going to work out for him? Like, I don't know who he is. Well, why did you appoint him acting attorney general then? I mean, that's circumventing all of the settled rules over what happens when an attorney general is fired or resigns. And there's different rules, by the way, of what can happen. But so he's like, I hardly know the guy. It's not my fault. Someone else told me to put him there or whatever. And I also see Daniel Dale reporting on someone else's report. Someone else is on the ground at the White House. Eamon Javers. I don't know who Eamon Javers is. CNBC. Trump White House correspondent, who says President Trump now criticizing Mueller, as he will every day, and using this excuse. Everybody is down on Matt Whitaker for a number of reasons. Yesterday we covered how shady he was, and we didn't get to the coverage of why it's simply flatly unconstitutional, illegal to move him into this position in this way and expect him to execute the duties of the Attorney General. And we can get to that. It's not even that hard. But
yeah, he's a principal officer. It was
Yeah.
the argument against recess appointments. The president can't do recess appointments. These are advice and consent positions, and yada yada yada. It was in the Consumer Finance. They're citing Judge Thomas's concurrence, Justice Thomas.
Yes.
But I'll be the cynical one here.
Yeah.
Go to court with that. What do you think? What do you think Clarence Thomas is going to say?
I've been thinking about that, and I might have got that wrong.
Yeah.
So that's the answer.
Is different.
But yeah,
as I said, if you can't find a reason to find, well, this is different because you can say, well, it's because it's only for 200 days as opposed to in between sessions and the question of the session.
He was on hand during all of his work. He knows it very intimately.
Yeah, listen, as you said, they could. This one, there is a federal question. This one, you will get hacked to death. I mean,
yeah.
But look, Whitaker's appointment is for 200 days, I believe, 210 days, right?
That's, I guess. I mean, that's how long it would take. But
if it's legal, I understand your point that it violates the Constitution. It actually probably violates the Succession Act, I think, as well. Someone pointed out is actually Judge Sugarman. You might want to look at that. Judge Sugarman looked at the statute that governs the succession and the Justice Department. Apparently there's a different law for that as opposed to the Vacancies Act. And it basically, he violated the law as well. All right, so what are you going to do?
LOL YOLO.
Who's got standing to sue? Any senator, theoretically, right?
That's the leading thought on it, yes. Okay.
He goes, then happens, and what? He says this gets overturned. The appointment and who do you sue? Trump for appointing him and Whitaker? And
everybody, I guess.
I think the more likely scenario is there's a point where Whitaker does something.
Yes.
And then someone decides to sue. Though I think, you get these Republicans say, "Oh, I don't have standing." Oh yeah, but you said the House had standing. You said House members had standing in this other case. Yeah, that was that case.
Yeah,
against Obama. This one's against Trump. We don't have standing this time.
It's a one-time thing, like Bush v. Gore, as a matter of fact. So there you go.
Yeah, and that's what I fear in the Florida recount as opposed to this Whitaker situation. What I just really can't conceive of a federal question. There is none in the Florida counting of the votes situation. There just isn't. And then I reread now. Oh, it's not about the vote counting, says Noah Rothman, the biggest lying never Trumper who I hate. And Greg, you were wrong about him too. If you're listening.
Okay.
He's like, it's not about the vote counting. It's about the lack of following the legal disclosure requirements.
Which?
Well, in theory, they're supposed to tell you give you an initial count. There's a guideline that says you give an initial count of early voting at the beginning of the night on election night.
Okay. Because
early voting is Sunday, you should have been able to count. All your votes have been processed, and you just dump them. Here's the problem with that.
Yes.
There are vote by mail early votes that arrive up to 7 p.m. And you can walk them in person up to 7 p.m.
That's true. You can do that.
I'm telling you, I know this because that's how my daughter's vote got in, and it got in the record.
You think it did?
No, I looked it up.
Okay, that's true. A lot of people have looked it up and said, "Hey, I'm not getting the message that it just says nothing."
Yeah, the funny thing is, Florida has a sunshine law, which makes its voting
how appropriate
records actually incredibly transparent. Oh, this is very transparent. Let me ask all those legal disclosure transparency Republicans. What do you know about the votes in Georgia? And how come
nothing,
transparency doesn't matter in Georgia?
That's some other stupid hick state.
It's about the ethics and legal disclosure requirements in Florida. It's not about counting the votes. They're lying.
I see. Yes. Okay.
He doesn't care about that. Noah Rothman doesn't care about any of that. None of these never Trumpers care about any of this. They're not never Trumpers. They are the same jokes that they were before.
I get you.
And this comes from Crystal to the end of them. They will, at the end of the day, be who they were.
Yes. Don't get too attached to them.
You saw it in Bush v. Gore. Those are the same guys that they hate Trump, or they don't hate Trump. They find Trump a little too uncouth for their taste.
Yes, it may even be more extreme than that. And you can hate certain Republicans and still be a Republican. It happens. You do it. I mean, right? Are there Democrats you like or don't like? Sure. If you can imagine that, then you can imagine what's going to happen on the other side. Don't get attached to them. You'll be disappointed. They'll happen with everybody, but particularly don't get attached to, I like this new woke David Frum. No, you don't.
I don't.
You like what's being said now because it's helpful. That's fine. You can latch on to that. Just don't say, boy, David Frum is awesome. Well, he's saying things that are helpful to you. That's all. Just leave it at that. So, yeah.
Well, I would say less than that because David Frum was a bad guy.
Well,
he didn't become a good guy because he's saying things that I like. He helped lie us into the Iraq War. He was a part of that.
You cannot deny that. I mean, you should not deny that. However, I can find people who will deny that.
Guy. He's still that guy. Don't kid yourself. That's who he is. That's who Noah Rothman is. That's who Bill Kristol is.
All it will take is finding the right hair to split.
Like all these people. Matthew Dowd has the temerity to say, we need to count all the votes. Screw you, Matthew Dowd. You stopped the voting when you were getting paid to be that. Now your little shtick is you're this guy. You know what? Yeah. I know who you are. Until you tell me, you know what, we stole, at least Lee Atwater confessed and begged forgiveness for all the stuff he did. Give me one of those.
All the latest stories coming out about what I don't know what it was that prompted. I guess Manafort's sentencing, and I guess somebody else who has recollections of Lee Atwater's deathbed confessions, who now faces his own deathbed, is spilling some of these stories too. I have said from the beginning of this rash of Lee Atwater stories, this story needs more deathbeds. That's what we got to get to. Is that more of these people have to be on death's door so we can find out what really happened and then say, good. All right. Well, I was mistaken thinking you were woke. Now that you're close to death, go to hell. Good.
Exactly. Listen, I need to get at least a max boat level of contrition before I even have a positive thought about any of them. There's, David Frum gets to pretend like it's all forgiven. You haven't even addressed what you were, because Trump is connected to these people. I understand the political impulse to downplay and pretend Trump is completely out of the ordinary.
I hardly know him.
Some of the things.
He's a coffee boy. Yeah. This is all true. By the way, the thing I wanted to get around to with the Whitaker thing,
go ahead.
and denying that I don't know anybody, I don't know him. The other play that apparently went on this morning that Eamon Javers was reporting on is now Trump was criticizing Mueller, but piggybacking on the very real backlash against Whitaker, and lots of writing this morning. I didn't get to any of the articles, but a plethora of coverage on how the backlash against Whitaker has caught the White House by surprise. Apparently, they're genuinely stunned that people are finding difficulty with Whitaker. And I guess what has made it stick, but they don't seem particularly concerned about, the fact that he's a huckster and a con man. That they like. But the accusation that's stinging because, supposed never Trumpers are saying, yeah, that's a real problem. I mean, I saw even Eric Erickson is saying, that you can't just appoint a guy off the street attorney general. And so they're cognizant of the fact that elite opinion, even among Republicans, is moving against Whitaker, and that the attack that is sticking is the Senate confirmation part. He's not Senate confirmed. So Trump heads out today to say, Mueller, he's crazy. We got to stop this whole witch hunt. Why? Why? What's your excuse today, Mr. President, quote unquote president? And he tells Eamon Javers and I guess the assembled crowd, well, Mueller was not Senate confirmed. Why didn't they get him Senate confirmed?
He did not say that.
He did. And Daniel Dale correctly pointing out, he said, this is an especially nonsensical "you're the puppet," which he's gone back to so many times in these last couple days.
This is a "you're the puppet."
You're no puppet. You're the puppet. Yeah. Like, I saw in the Acosta confrontations yesterday and with Al Sindor as well, the no racism. You're the racist.
You're the racist.
Yeah. Right. No puppet.
By the way, that's the Republican mantra.
Yeah.
We're the real racists.
Right. Isn't calling racists racist the real racist? Yeah. Right. That's where
it was racist to call racists
cemented it. Once the elite, the television guys who are supposed to be the arbiters of fairness, even he says that calling someone a racist for their racism is racist. But isn't that racism? No, that's labeling racism.
Whatever happened to David Muir?
He's still there, right? He's in the art museum looking at Magritte paintings, saying, "But isn't this really a pipe?" No, it says it's not a pipe. I know, but isn't labeling it not a pipe really calling it a pipe? No, it's not. So I don't know. So that's where he is.
It is nonsensical. I mean, I think we should take a moment to explain why Mueller did not have to be confirmed by the Senate.
That is a very democratic thing to do.
He's not a principal officer.
Okay.
Principal officers are the ones that have to be Senate confirmed. And they're designated. The special counsel is just holding the power of the Justice Department. And he answers to, they actually had this argument.
He reports to a Senate-confirmed principal officer.
There was actually an argument in the D.C. Circuit, I believe, yesterday or 2 days ago, where the crazy Roger Stone, Boy Friday, coffee boy guy was fighting the subpoena. By the way, where does he get the money to pay for a lawyer to fight that subpoena?
The same dark money as Whitaker, who had his salary paid for 3 years.
That'd be worth knowing. Anyway, he made the argument
from the Federalist,
that you want Senate confirmed and you can't do it. That's basically they did the Trump argument, and Michael Dreeben, who is the designated appellate attorney for Mueller, said, "What are you talking about? He's not a principal officer."
Yeah, although I did see somebody observing that. I mean, this wouldn't hold sway with me necessarily in court, but someone does point out, well, Mueller was the FBI director. I mean, at that point he was Senate confirmed, and I mean, for usually Republicans are arguing, for instance, when you're moving somebody up in the levels of courts, well, like they did it with Kavanaugh. Why do we even have to have these hearings? He's already Senate confirmed. Yeah, for another job. Judge, now we're going to change his name to Justice. What's the big deal? We already did this. He lied last time, and we want to talk about that.
Yeah, but still, it's a nonsensical argument, but I don't know what panel they drew. Maybe they'll get him, but I don't think so. I think we have the D.C. Circuit pretty wired. Thank you, Harry Reid, for that.
You're welcome.
Exactly. Thank you, David, for convincing Harry Reid. Finally, to do what could have been done. But of course, it could go to the Supreme Court, and they could say that the special counsel reg has to comply with the Appointments Act clause, and therefore Mueller's fired. I could see Kavanaugh saying that, but that takes a little time.
Yes.
And
What's up here?
there has to be a D.C. circuit, and by the way, I doubt they want to even touch that with a 10-foot pole. But hey, they've done it before, right? There's 4 votes for cert for sure. There's Kavanaugh, Alito, Thomas, and Gorsuch. So does John Roberts want this? I don't know. I'd be surprised, frankly, if any of them want this. That at all. I don't. It's too. They wouldn't. I don't think they would actually stop vote counts if they could actually get there. These are all lifetime appointments. They have the Senate anyway. What do they care? It just would completely destroy. How fun is it to be the Supreme Court justice when everyone knows it's just a joke? I mean, you and I know, but most people don't know that.
They don't.
No, look at you got like Neil Katyal and Jeff Rosen and Akhil Amar saying, no, we should confirm these guys. The whole Yale nonsense.
Oh.
The Tiger Woman or whatever her name was.
Tiger Mom, yeah. I wish I remembered.
Amy Chua.
Okay, good call. Now Neil Katyal was just mentioned. Michael Musson had just mentioned him in a comment here. What does he say here? Neil Katyal said that standing with regard to Whitaker is a non-issue. Even all current parties in suits like XYZ versus AG Sessions, which are apparently common for federal suits, although I'm not certain I understand what's being posited here. But...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's not a problem until it is.
Well, all of these things. I guess any place. There are so many places where this can go off the rails, and it's hard to name them all or anticipate them all under this president in particular because he doesn't give a goddamn what he says or how stupid it sounds. And he's got a cadre of people around him who are willing to do what they need to do in order to make the nonsensical ravings either appear sensible or just say, I know they're crazy, but look, the law is the law. That's what it is now. And essentially, as I put it the other day, changing Wikipedia after the fact to make it look like that was really true all along. And, like with the tax cut thing. What? By the way, that too, like the caravan disappeared. No more coverage of the caravan. And no more coverage of the fake tax cut that never came to fruition, even though people scrambled to try to put in bills. No, this is the tax cut he was talking about. I hadn't signed it yet and put it in the hopper. It was all ready. This is a blank page. It doesn't say anything. What?
No,
look
you
away.
got it off that stack of papers that Trump's lawyers brought.
Right. And it just said, oh, look, what do you mean it doesn't say anything? Give me that. Don't you see? It's an invisible ink. What are you talking about? Look, tax cut, 10%. You just wrote that. I saw you write that. No, I didn't. It's on video. I didn't. I did. A White House intern was viciously attacked somehow to write this. What? White House intern? What are you even talking about? I don't know. It worked last week. It's a tax cut. We didn't vote on it yet. We might kill it.
Was it the same intern who was taking the mic from across?
Yes.
That poor girl.
Yeah. Well, luckily, I think she's managed to avoid being, identified, and we should leave it that way.
Yeah.
She was stupid, but whatever. But she was. If you saw the video, I mean, she's checking with Trump the whole time. Like, is this what you want me to do?
She's like frightened to death, and this big fight going on. And
of course,
the reality.
She should have been.
If they had, they apparently they staged it. They should have had someone, like some senior person stepping up there instead of some poor little White House intern
to make her do
who got thrust into this nonsense. But
that
anyway,
was very unfortunate for her. But okay, she signed on.
It sounds stupid to worry about her. Well, she's a White House intern for the Trump House. You can say all those things. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you talked about poor Tucker Carlson. Oh, poor Tucker.
I haven't.
Someone's yelling outside his house.
That is, my controversial opinion on that is, that's
my controversial
I wouldn't
opinion.
be there. I wouldn't do it, but that's not necessarily because, oh my goodness, this shouldn't be done. This is against civility. It is against civility, and I would worry about that. And I wouldn't go because I'm a chicken. about those things, generally speaking, unless I'm personally involved.
I just don't think Tucker Carlson merits a protest.
Yeah, well, he
Actually,
doesn't, probably.
What do I care about what Tucker Carlson says?
Yeah, I guess there's that, too. So there's a number of reasons you wouldn't be able to convince me to go along, and I would advise you against
if it was
if you were
McConnell's
asking
house,
me.
I'd say,
maybe better.
The White House, people stand at the White House and yell and scream at the president.
I will say, I guess the furthest out on a limb I will definitely go on it is, I don't think I believe Tucker Carlson about this.
Oh, I don't believe him at all.
But
I assume there were people there yelling.
Yes, but he has already said, they were battering, they were going to break the door down. My wife thought it was a home invasion. They cracked my door.
Call the cops. I mean,
they did. She did. She called the cops, and the cops came, and the cops said, what's up? They were breaking down the door. Well, your door looks fine. There's no mention in the police report about it. Carlson is like, they cracked the door. Did they? Wow, that's they murdered my whole family. They did? They didn't, but they could have. That's the point. I guess that was always possible, and it really could have been anybody.
Yeah, well, maybe he's rich. He could have a security guard.
That's true too. And Christine
Remember,
Blasey Ford has.
And we don't need the cops. I'll have my own cops.
Right? Yeah. Why call the cops? You should have started shooting out the door. Really?
Exactly.
There was already a hole in it. You might as well fire through it.
Why did you start shooting?
Yes. This is horrible. But as others have pointed out, Christine Blasey Ford apparently has moved 4 times since this. I didn't even know he had time to move 4 times.
Some guy called in threats to Don Lemon. I mean, people have been sending pipe bombs in the mail, and he was laughing about it.
Right.
So, you know what?
I mean,
but you know what? It's stupid. Do not let this guy become a martyr.
No.
I don't know who it was. They say it's Antifa or whoever. But maybe it's just people that Tucker Carlson paid to do that.
That is also possible. That's not beyond Tucker Carlson's...
It really is. I mean, who thinks about Tucker Carlson? I don't think about Tucker Carlson. Do you?
I don't. Although when he puts himself in the news, I say, that guy's despicable. I hate his guts.
What I'm saying is we weren't thinking about him until this story.
Right. So now we are. And lots of other backstory to it, too. I've seen a number of people, including the guy behind the Sleeping Giants boycott movement, which has been very successful, under the radar mostly, saying, look, he too, starting off with the disclaimer, look, I'm opposed to this sort of thing, but I will point out, Tucker Carlson lives and dies by exactly this sort of tactic. His Daily Caller publication has been outing the private information of his preferred political opponents for a very long time, and all of that information is still online, uncensored in the comments to the Daily Caller website. They're constantly doxing people, and those people are getting death threats and having their doors knocked on. And this is stock in trade for Tucker Carlson. And then somebody did it to him, and ooh, I can't have this. My paint is chipped.
Yep.
Well, and by the way, I mean, don't forget also how Tucker Carlson probably came into the consciousness of most old-time Daily Kos people when he was making fun of John Edwards, which turned out to be a good call, I guess we have to acknowledge, but not for this, but for his having taken on lawsuits by the victims of the jacuzzi company manufactured pool drains, which were disemboweling children in wading pools. And he said, he's a jacuzzi lawyer, talking about some kids who had been horribly injured by this, $1, could have been corrected with a $1 part, and they wouldn't do it because money. And Tucker Carlson thought that was hilarious to make fun of these kids who had been permanently disabled as a result of this thing.
He's a terrible person.
Yeah.
I just...
Screw that guy.
At every turn, I mean, I have no sympathy for him. I just have no interest in him, and I don't understand why anyone's going to protest him, is all I'm saying.
All right. Well, I think that's reasonable coverage of that. We are bumping up against another break, but there are plenty of other things to struggle with. But I don't know if there's anything you want to add on Florida.
I've got to go, actually.
All right.
Someone
go count votes.
Who's paid me has asked me to do some work, and I think that's completely unreasonable.
Ridiculous.
But I think I'm going to do it.
All right, we'll protest that guy's house after.
Yeah, I'm going to go protest that guy's house instead of say, "What? I paid you? You want me to do something for you?" No,
we know where you live.
I have to go.
Okay, very good.
All right,
well done. Good responsibility. Thanks. We'll see you next week probably. Take care. Go get that money. Make them pay you. All right. Well, okay. So, plenty to catch up with as well on a number of other fronts. We'll tease you on a couple of these things. We probably ought to talk a little bit more about the Whitaker backlash and the alleged inability to, predict this in the moron White House. Although I don't know whether to believe that or not. And more updates on a number of other stories. It's the weekend. We're going to scramble to get to everything that we can and arm you with all the information we can for the weekend's craziness. Let's see. I don't even know how many of these things we're going to be able to squeeze in. But plenty to come still on federal matters, and as well more breaking news or more developments on the mass shooting under the cloud of which we are still under. How about that? Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. There's so many things happening that we need to catch up on. Apparently, Trump has been out on the lawn. Which lawn is it? I don't know. The South Lawn, maybe? You tell me. Taking questions for some time. And I guess, as I said the other day, somebody is in his ear, not necessarily currently at the moment, but somebody's been telling him, even from the moment of the now, it turns out, apparently staged fight with Jim Acosta, and I guess we could get to that news too, perhaps, is someone's been telling him that fighting with this meltdown of fighting directly with reporters is working for him. You know, the base loves it. You just lost a huge election going with what the base loves, but here's some more that the base loves. And so now he is fighting with another female reporter, CNN's Abby Phillip, apparently. Daniel Dale has the full quote from him that Trump, while glaring and shaking his finger at her, saying, "What a stupid question that is. What a stupid question. But I watch you a lot. You ask a lot of stupid questions," which of course means he watches CNN, which he denies, et cetera, but that's where we are. Let's see. His thread on it goes back a little bit here. Asked about Jim Acosta. Trump brings up April Ryan and questions the competency of a black person for the third time this week. I mean, you talk about somebody that's a loser. She doesn't know what the hell she's doing. In the same exchange, Trump told another black female journalist, Abby Phillip, that her perfectly normal, good, and important question, I don't know what it was, there it is, was a stupid question. The question from Abby Phillip: do you want acting AG Matt Whitaker to rein in Mueller? What a stupid question that is. What a stupid question, but I watch you a lot. You ask a lot of stupid questions. This guy is, I don't know. I mean, what can I tell you? He's incompetent to the task. Somebody's telling him that this is great and he should keep doing it, and so he is. That's where we are. All right. Let's see. Wrapping up a couple other things. Marshall Cohen, another CNN reporter, in talking about that stupid argument that he offered up a few minutes ago, that Mueller's investigation is invalid because he's not Senate confirmed. Marshall Cohen again pointing out for us here, this is one of the arguments that lawyers representing various parties in the Russia probe, as Armando mentioned, have tried to use to invalidate Mueller's powers. Essentially, they say he's a de facto U.S. attorney and needs Senate confirmation. So far, 0 judges have agreed with this argument. I guess You're going to have to take it to the Supreme Court and just have them overrule all past precedent on the question and change their minds. But, that's not beyond the pale. It's not that it cannot happen. I guess you're just going to have to keep an eye out for this. So I guess another morning meltdown or a press conference setting meltdown this morning. And sadly, we are unable to monitor it in real time. But that's fine. That's okay. It gives us time to check in on some other stories. I mentioned, for instance, the latest developments in the coverage of the mass shooting in Thousand Oaks of the other day. Couple of things on that one. The new, I guess the investigative fact part of it, I happen to have grabbed from BuzzFeed News here because I get my news from Twitter, and that means largely BuzzFeed and The Hill, apparently. Claudia Rosenbaum has this piece titled this way: The Thousand Oaks shooter used a high-capacity magazine that voters outlawed in 2016. Subheader: Enforcement of the 2016 law that bans possession of high-capacity magazines has been blocked pending the outcome of the lawsuit. So what's being said here is gun advocates, many of whom perhaps were at the country and western themed bar, maybe that night, although apparently none of them were armed and willing to shoot back. But anyway, the point here really being California asked its citizenry how they wanted to deal with this thing, and they spoke, and gun rights advocates have blocked implementation of the law. Frankly, probably they would say to you, it doesn't matter, criminals aren't going to obey laws anyway, and this one didn't, except the law hasn't been implemented, so we can't even get to that point. And of course, he kills himself at the end of it, so he's never going to face any consequences for it. So there's also that. But it is worth perhaps pointing out that, used a high-capacity magazine that in 2016 California voters banned anyone in the state from possessing, but implementation of the law has been blocked by a lawsuit brought by, you'll never guess, the NRA and other gun rights advocates. Authorities say the 28-year-old Marine veteran, and you've probably heard his name by now. I guess I don't have to add it except to say he's not Muslim, which is what Pam Geller and others would have had you believe from the beginning. Used a Glock 21 45 caliber handgun with an extended magazine to kill 12 people at the popular Borderline Bar and Grill Wednesday night. Ventura County Sheriff Jeff Dean said Long obtained the gun legally, but did not immediately know where, when, or how Long obtained the high-capacity magazine. He also didn't know how many rounds were loaded. And I guess, we probably don't need to take too much more out of this other than noting for the record that, the NRA, in their bid to, like Marsha Blackburn says, defend the Second Amendment in the wake of tragedies like this, have made sure that, I guess, it's been awfully difficult to get a hold of the people who have these magazines in their possession. And I guess really, honestly, there's just no mechanism out there for rounding those things up except cleaning them up at the site of mass shootings and hoping that that's the end of it and that people aren't 3D printing their own extended capacity magazines. Probably also a good time to remind everybody, as I did yesterday, I don't know whether this was the case, but we had made mention of the fact that this mass shooting didn't involve apparently a long rifle or AR-15 style or otherwise. And I don't know that this was how the shooting was done, but good time to just bring up this sore point, I guess, that all semi-automatic weapons, handguns or otherwise, can fire machine gun style. They can all be bump fired without modification and without additional equipment. And YouTube is stocked to the rafters with videos of people demonstrating how it's done and even explaining why it can be done. It is the basic intentional function of all semi-automatic weapons that they can be operated this way. It's not, I guess I shouldn't say the intention necessarily, but these things are intentionally designed in ways that make bump firing, machine gun style, possible. There's no, I don't think that there's any semi-automatic weapon that can't be fired this way. And that's probably one of the biggest problems with, say, banning bump stocks is, although I have yet, we should be clear, I've yet to see a mass shooting anywhere where it was ever alleged that the shooter was bump firing a semi-automatic weapon without a bump stock attached. But it is entirely possible, and it is entirely possible to do great damage in a crowd. The great drawback of bump firing a semi-automatic weapon without a bump stock is you can't aim the thing very well. But if you're firing in a crowded bar, you don't really have to. Okay. Well, anyway, that's out there. I thought we'd add that. And there's a slightly more disturbing element to this that Mark Sumner was tweeting earlier today, and I was wondering what the source of this story was. But as it turns out, there actually is a report that that details this. But he had grabbed. Is this the one that has the quote in it or not? I can just grab the quote. I think so. But at any rate, it wasn't manufactured. It's out there. Oh, I have to kill the auto playing video here in order to get rid of that. But let's grab Mark's grab from the story. The important part of it is this: the bar shooter apparently left behind, as many of these weirdos do, a digital footprint, a manifesto, I guess, if you will. And I guess it came in the form of a Facebook post. So the bar shooter's own words were, quote, "I hope people call me insane. Wouldn't that just be a big ball of irony? Yeah, I'm insane, but the only thing you people do after I'm insane," I guess we'll emphasize it that way. Yeah, I'm insane, but the only thing you people do after these shootings is hopes and prayers or keep you in my thoughts every time and wonder why these keep happening. That's pretty chilling as a premeditated statement from somebody on their way to do a mass shooting, is to say, yeah, I know what you're going to do about this. Nothing. And I'm going to be dead, so I don't care, I guess, is his further response to that one. I think that this article will, I think this produces the quote as well. And it's KPLC News story on it. California bar shootings victims included young students, Marine veteran, sheriff's deputy, etc. Lots of photos of the people killed. And let's see, if I scroll down, is this the one that tells me where this came from? I was pretty sure that this was it, but I wanted to have confirmation somewhere about where that quote came from, and now I see that it's I guess not in this one, unless it's all the way down at the bottom here. But all right, well, we'll have to dig that one up. But I can tell you this: you're fairly safe in trusting Mark on this one. And I guess probably if we really wanted to, and I'll do this after the show, I'll grab the quote and search that, and that'll bring us to an article that unfortunately he didn't include a link to where that information was coming from. I thought I had included that very shortly after the piece, but or his quoting of it anyway. All right, so I'm going to move on from there and move back to the Whitaker story, or at least briefly anyway, and bring up a couple of the amazing pieces that are being circulated. I don't think I've ever said that Ruth Marcus was amazing in any capacity, except that I'm amazed that she's such a idiot sometimes. But she had an opinion piece that's being shared widely, of course, in her own Washington Post, which I appreciated the bluntness of the headline of "Matthew Whitaker is a crackpot." And we did discuss most of this yesterday and why he's a crackpot, but we didn't get to the legal portions of why he's a crackpot. He's a scammer and a jerk, but Ruth Marcus has the other half of the story here. The acting attorney general of the United States is a crackpot, and you could stop calling him the acting attorney general of the United States. That's my position. He is not the acting attorney general of the United States. The appointment is illegal, and you ought to say so. But okay. Matthew G. Whitaker, installed in the job by President Trump to replace Jeff Sessions, was asked in 2014 during an ill-fated run in the Republican senatorial primary in Iowa about the worst decisions of the Supreme Court's history. Whitaker's answer to an Iowa blog called Caffeinated Thoughts was chilling. There are so many, he replied. I would start with the idea of Marbury versus Madison. That's probably a good place to start. And the way it's looked at in the Supreme Court as the final arbiter of constitutional issues. Maybe I ought to adopt this position at this point because it's so scary that this Supreme Court would be viewed as the final arbiter of constitutional decisions. Maybe I ought to piggyback on this after all. But the quote continues, we'll move forward from there. All New Deal cases that were expensive of the federal government, those would be bad. I don't remember what they are, but then all the way up to the Affordable Care Act and the individual mandate. So he's pushing all the buttons, you know. Reasonable people can differ over the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act. Maybe, says Ruth Marcus, thanks. No, they can't. It's constitutional. Maybe there's some space to debate the New Deal era cases that cemented the authority of the regulatory state. But Marbury? This is lunacy. For any lawyer, certainly for one now at the helm of the Justice Department, to disagree with Marbury is like a physicist denouncing the laws of gravity. But I don't know, I've already found a backdoor way to agreeing with him. Let's use it to undermine the authority of the Supreme Court. Sure, why don't you? And he was coming at it from a very different perspective. Now, of course, he would love for their word to be binding so that now that he can use that and leverage that power, that won't bother him anymore. That's my prediction for Matthew Whitaker. Also of interest, MSNBC's piece here. Steve Bannon put this one up for MSNBC from his perch at the Rachel Maddow show. Trump world didn't realize the acting AG would be, which he isn't, would be seen as a crackpot. That's the more interesting angle in the story, really. It's not a sentence one ordinarily expects to see in one of the nation's largest and most important newspapers. The acting attorney general of the United States is a crackpot. And yet, that was the first sentence in the latest column from Ruth Marcus. You know that because we just read it. It's a provocative assessment rooted deeply in fact. Matt Whitaker, whom Trump appointed as the nation's chief law enforcement official this week, is a rather ridiculous choice. We are, after all, talking about a shamelessly partisan loyalist with a strange far-right worldview and with close ties to a witness who's testified in an ongoing and federal investigation. He's also a con man, of course, as we discussed yesterday. Whitaker has bashed the federal courts. He's condemned an investigation he's now overseeing, and he won't recuse himself from, despite calls from 18 state attorneys general. He's already decided what the outcome of special counsel Robert Mueller's probe should be. He's perhaps best known for having advised suspected con artists. Complicating matters, Whitaker is the first attorney general, which he is not, acting or permanent, which he's not either, to ever hold the position without having been confirmed to the Justice Department by the Senate. Many experts have made a very credible case that the president's appointment of Whitaker is plainly illegal. The bottom line is unavoidable. This crackpot has no business overseeing the Justice Department of a global superpower, all of which raises the question of how the president chose Whitaker for the position in the first place. CNN had this interesting report yesterday. It was not widely known among White House staff that he'd commented repeatedly on the special counsel's investigation in interviews and on television, which is ironic given that this is what drew President Donald Trump to him and raises continued questions over the depth of the administration's vetting process. Extreme vetting, eh? Sam Clovis, a 2016 Trump campaign national chairman who has close ties to Whitaker, encouraged him to get a regular commentary gig on cable television to get Trump's attention. That's the provenance of that. It wasn't even his idea. According to friends Whitaker told at the time, Whitaker was hired as a CNN legal commentator last year for several months before leaving the role in September of 2017 to head to the Justice Department. You hear that, CNN? It's your fault. You, I don't know what color, washed this guy. You orange washed this guy. You made him a legitimate contender in the dotard's eyes for a serious position. Trump may not rely on intelligence reports, but he does rely heavily on his remote control. In this administration, the key to acquiring power and influence is appearing on the president's television and saying what Trump wants to hear. Indeed, much of the pushback against Whitaker is predicated on the obvious fact that he's not qualified to oversee the Justice Department, even on a temporary basis. But in this White House, qualifications are irrelevant, a fact Trump has made clear over and over again, with some links to illustrate the case. It's very easy to believe the White House did no meaningful vetting of Whitaker before the president made him acting attorney general, which he didn't, because he can't. Because this White House doesn't seem to do meaningful vetting of practically anyone, the result is a series of fiascos like this one. It's Harriet Miers over and over and over and over and over again. What else? A New York Times piece. That's the one that Neil Katyal is involved with, and George Conway, Kellyanne Conway's husband, teamed up with on this one, an opinion piece in the Times. Trump's appointment of the acting attorney general, which he isn't, is unconstitutional, which is why he isn't one. The president is evading the requirement to seek the Senate's advice and consent for the nation's chief law enforcement officer and the person who will oversee the Mueller investigation. This would probably be a longer-winded and perhaps more thorough way of saying what Jesse Lee said, I think, very clearly yesterday. He really reduced it to the quickest and easiest formulation. Did I put it aside? Probably not. But I retweeted it yesterday, which means if I scroll far enough, I'll be able to find it for you. But it was not even difficult to grasp, I don't think. And let's see if I can find it. I think he says he actually posts it in response to Matt Iglesias, who, by the way, I understand, do I understand this correctly? Matt Iglesias, deleted all his tweets yesterday, which was an amazing thing. And I think it was because he was pushing back against the, oh, poor Tucker Carlson, this is horrible, trend. And I think rightly so. And he then, I guess, got piled on by trolls and bots and ended up deleting all his tweets, which was amazing all by itself. Let's see. If I scroll back far enough, I'll be able to find this thing. And I think I'm getting into the area here. Boy, and I'm passing so many other things that I really ought to comment on. But here is Jesse Lee's response. And, of course, the Matt Iglesias tweet to which he's responding is no longer available. But Iglesias was expressing some sort of confusion about, I haven't been able to really follow the idea that the constitutional argument against his appointment is making. And it's pretty simple, and I agree. And Jesse Lee puts it inside of a tweet. I think the constitutional argument is actually pretty simple. He already says that, and he still has room to make it. If this is legit, and this is the best distillation, I think, of the whole thing. If this appointment is legitimate, then advice and consent, the clause about advice and consent in the Constitution, is dead. It means you could take any hack off the street, give them some assistant job, and then catapult them to head an agency with no review, which is basically what they did. I mean, if you look at the mechanics of how this worked, right? Jeff Sessions was made Attorney General the traditional way, and they supposedly vetted him, but whatever. They put him through Senate confirmation, and he gets it. He shouldn't have, but he did. So he's the Attorney General. Now he needs an assistant, and by this we mean a chief of staff. And as we learned in reading about Whitaker, he only comes to the job in July of 2017. He's not Jeff Sessions' choice for chief of staff, I don't think. I don't know where he comes from. But he gets put in the job as chief of staff, and chief of staff, is like executive assistant, essentially, to the Attorney General, to whoever a chief of staff happens to be serving, but in this case, the Attorney General. And so it's not Senate approved because who cares? It's somebody who's answerable directly to the Attorney General and, who helps him with staffing affairs and arranging his schedule and all kinds of things. And, he's a glorified, as Armando put it, Guy Friday, I guess. This is not a big deal. So it didn't require, he wasn't a policy person. He wasn't an officer of the government. And so, as Jesse puts it pretty clearly, if this is a legitimate appointment, what you do is, don't forget the fact that Trump engineered this resignation by Sessions, as Sessions makes clear in his resignation letter. So what you do is you say, all right, well, Matt Whitaker is my preferred guy. He's a loyalist. He would shut down the Mueller investigation. I would make him attorney general, except he'd never get approved by the Senate, or there's some question. I mean, now I guess we've now realized this Senate, these Republicans in this Senate would probably do anything for Trump, and maybe he would get approval. But I don't want to deal with that. I need the Mueller probe shut down now, and if I have to go through Senate confirmation, it's not going to work. It might not even be that he particularly likes Matt Whitaker. The point is, though, you put a loser crackpot kook in a non-Senate approved position and then force the person actually holding that position to resign, and then say the president gets to say, you will be the acting attorney general. Now, like we discussed briefly before, if the attorney general is fired, there's a law in place that says who takes over as acting attorney general. The idea of which is you shouldn't be able to fire the attorney general as president and then take your pick of who is going to take over so that he'll do your bidding when the original attorney general won't. There's a Saturday Night Massacre backstop that he can't just keep picking new people. He has to go all the way down the line. And it existed before the Saturday Night Massacre. That's why he had to perpetrate the Saturday Night Massacre. Nixon did. But what this means is anybody that you think can't pass muster in the advice and consent version of how do you get principal officers of the government installed, you simply install in an assistant job and then fire the principal and say his assistant takes over, despite all laws that say everybody else has to be gone through first. So that's what they did. They killed advice and consent by doing this. And it became a backdoor recess appointment without even having to wait for the Congress to recess. You just choose a different guy. So it's very dangerous, and it's very simple to explain. If you want, you can read George Conway and Neil Katyal doing it and see if they turn you into a legal scholar that way. Wow. So there's that. There's not much time for much else at the moment, except I guess we ought to note prior to the weekend that Ryan Zinke apparently has read the writing on the wall and is working actively and courting an offer from Fox News. He's looking for Fox to take him on as a pundit or commentator and pay him so that he can finally exit from the cabinet. I guess that's supposed to mean that Trump is expressing rising displeasure with him and would like him to be gone as well. So be on the lookout for that, I guess. Let's see. Other news on what we can squeeze in before we get out of here. Geez, I don't think there's anything else that we can fit in. So, it might be time instead. Oh, there is a Ryan Zinke story that I forgot about, and maybe this is what he thinks is going to hasten his exit. The Washington Post reported the other day, Juliet Elperin, Darrell Fears, and Lisa Rain on November 6th. Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke called police on his neighbors Monday night in a kerfuffle outside his Capitol Hill home. And this one is weird, and it makes this is a good Friday exit story. Living next to cabinet officials can be tough on Washingtonians, but the events that unfolded Monday night in front of Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke's home were weird by any standards. This sounds good. The Mercedes SUV had been idling for 2 hours and was taking up 3 parking spots on the 100 block of Kentucky Avenue Southeast. So Lincoln Park resident, I lost my place here, Gina Arlotto, asked the driver to turn the engine off and back up to free up 2 parking spots, she said on Tuesday. The driver didn't remove the car, but he killed the engine. Neighbor Paul Laguerre was coming home from work when his wife called to warn him that the car had been idling for hours on the block, a notoriously difficult place to find parking, as you can imagine. When Laguerre arrived, he too asked the driver to move the car and create a parking space, and again the driver refused. We had some words. I've had some parking issues in the past, and this was not a government SUV. He wouldn't identify himself. He said he was waiting for his boss, this driver said. That's when a man who appeared to be about 6 feet tall, white, and about 30 years old emerged from Zinke's front door. He said, "I'm Ryan Zinke." I said, "Dude, you're not Zinke. I live here. I know when you're Zinke." I asked, "Who are you?" Laguerre recounted. He said his name was Scott. Scott what? Well, according to Laguerre, the man wheeled around toward the house without an answer and muttered as he walked to the front door. Within minutes, by about 9:30 p.m., and I just realized we have the wrong music playing entirely, and we'll have to go with this one instead. Wow, that was a mistake. All of you listening at home probably said, what the hell does he think he's doing? He's not going on another break. That's true. I'm winding things up instead, and I guess I'm going to have to leave it there, as a matter of fact. I wonder what would happen if we went a little bit longer. Justice, is it okay if I do that? How about if I leave off of this story after telling you that the man wheels around, goes back into the front door. Within minutes, by about 9:30 p.m., U.S. Park Police arrived. Neighbors assumed the man named Scott had called them, as Park Police fall under Zinke's department, but it turns out it was the secretary himself. Interior spokeswoman Faith Vandervoort said in an email that Zinke was inside his house at the time watching football and barbecuing with friends. He alerted his protective security detail about a suspicious individual staking out his home and guests. While waiting for the U.S. Park Police to arrive, another individual began yelling profanities in the street about the president and the secretary. The secretary remained inside his home the entire night while the Park Police responded. So, no idea who this suspicious individual is. No idea at this point who was coming out of his house pretending to be him. I don't know whether we'll ever get to the bottom of this one or whether Zinke will have resigned by the time we do. But I just thought I'd add that one for the weekend. Now it's past time to hand the microphone over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with all the greatest stories in the world.
Coos
Coming
Radio
up next
on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
All right. Well, we're not already off the air because it is time for Justice's program. If he's just waiting for us to clear out, we're going to do that next. He's got the story of Rick Scott and his freak out down in Florida. He's got a story from out of Oregon where the House Majority Leader said her Democratic caucus will attempt to overturn the state's racist, non-unanimous jury law, just like Louisiana. Next.